Hello, everybody. We're going to wait a few minutes to get started, wait for people to kind of make their way in. But thank you so much for everyone for being here for this webinar series. We're really excited to have you here, and we're especially excited for our presenter today, Dr. Jessica Koblenz. So we're really excited to hear about her book and about a lot of the work that she does. So um, just as a way of reminder for announcements, sorry, I'm used to working in live. The down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A section. So if at any time you have a question or anything, you can go ahead and put that into the feature. If everybody wants to right now in the chat, say what parish you're from, or what area of the states you are from. If you are in the States, you might be somewhere else out of the States, which would be awesome. And what drew you to the ministry, working with individuals who experience mental health challenges. So go ahead and put those in the chats. It's always great, especially for these events, to get to know other people in the field who are interested in this particular field, this particular interest. So thank you. So we'll just give it a few more minutes, a few more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us today. It's so wonderful to have you here, to be in this space, this virtual space with us. It's so wonderful. And I'm halfway through the book. I have to admit, I did not finish it. I apologize, but it's such a wonderful testament, and I'm so excited to hear. So just for those of you who don't know, Dr. Jessica Koblenz is a assistant systematic professor at St. Mary's College here in Notre Dame, Indiana. She's also the author of Dust in the Blood. Wonderful book. If you get a chance to pick it up, please do. It's a theological, it's a theology of life with depression, which is such a wonderful testament, and I'll let her talk about it because she's the author. But she's just a prolific writer, has been in Give Us This Day, has done work for various different Catholic publications, and we're just so excited to have you with us. So no further ado, Jessica.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brother Fred, and to everybody at NCPD for the opportunity to be here in conversation with you tonight, and to everybody who's tuning in from your respective parts of the world. In my work as a theologian and as a lay ecclesial minister in the Catholic Church as well, I find that most often when we hear about issues like depression, we hear about it from psychologists, from great social workers like Brother Fred, and other mental health care workers, which is great. But for this reason, it seems important for me to begin my remarks today by sharing a little bit about why I, as a Catholic theologian, wrote this book about depression, Dust in the Blood. And there are two major reasons. So first, I have learned from my own experiences of depression and from the stories of countless others who have experienced this condition, that depression frequently rouses distinctly theological questions about God and God's relationship to our world, questions that the church's theologians are uniquely trained and equipped to engage. We find one example that I want to share with you in the memoir of womanist theologian Monica Coleman, who, reflecting on a recurrence of depression during graduate school recounts its effect on her spirituality. I had gotten in the habit of turning to God, writes Coleman, but all of a sudden I couldn't. It's not that I didn't want to, I just couldn't. I didn't trust God to take care of me. I didn't trust God to hear me. And I didn't trust the church to understand. Looking back on this period in her life, Coleman concludes, my silence with God was my way of asking, where are you, God? Psychologist Martha Manning recalls a similar experience amid her depression, writing, it's hard to reconcile my old concept of a merciful God with my recent experience of a hateful, spiteful God, or a totally indifferent God who plays 52 pickup with people's lives. Manning asks, what did I do to deserve what I got? Will I ever be forgiven? These doubts mirror what Manning elsewhere identifies as the continual lament of her depression. Why me? She asks. Why me? The respective questions of Coleman and Manning, where are you, God, and why me, are the cries of many who struggle to make sense of depression as Christians. These are theological questions. And as scholars trained in thinking with the scriptures, beliefs, and practices of the Christian faith, theologians should have something to offer sufferers and the wider Catholic community as they grapple with these weighty intellectual questions. The second reason why I, as a theologian, have taken on this topic concerns Christianity's preferential option for the poor. This is one of the central tenets of Catholic social teaching, as I'm sure many of you know, and it's premised on the conviction that God accompanies and champions the vulnerable and the oppressed above all others. God, in turn, calls God's people, the church, to do so as well. That depression renders sufferers vulnerable is evident from any sincere look at this mental health condition, I think. But additionally, research shows us that in the US, those who are socially marginalized and oppressed suffer disproportionately from depression. So women experience higher rates of depression than men. Racial minorities are more likely to experience extended and severely debilitating symptoms when they suffer from depression. Transgender youth are nearly four times more likely to experience depression than their cisgender peers. Meanwhile, cis lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer teens experience significantly more depressive symptoms and higher rates of suicidality than their heterosexual peers. If Christians care about women and about Black and brown lives, about queer lives, that is, if Christians care about the vulnerable and the oppressed who God loves the most, then Christians must attend to depression. This book I've written, Dust in the Blood, is my own kind of small attempt to be faithful to this divine imperative. So now I want to tell you a little bit about the book itself to offer a glimpse of some of the theological resources that I present there. So Dust in the Blood unfolds in two parts. Part one examines popular ideas about depression in American society, and then considers the particular way that American Christians, including American Catholics, often talk about this experience. In everyday talk about depression, it's common to hear people like you and me characterize it as a form of long and severe sadness. Yet the narratives of depression sufferers themselves reveal something quite different. They tell us that living with depression is not just a series of bad days, which is a customary part of how everyone experiences the world from time to time, right? Instead, sufferers describe their depression as a kind of dislocation into another world. It's a harsh reality where their otherwise typical experiences of connection, meaning making and agency diminish or sometimes dissipate altogether. This imagery of displacement into another world conveys that depression is far more encompassing than ordinary emotion. It is a sort of radical shift in one's experience of life. What's more, depression is an unfamiliar and uncomfortable world, an alien and unearthly landscape. Depression is, to use the apt philosophical language of phenomenology, a decidedly unhome-like place. While characterizations of depression as mere sadness miss these distinctive and difficult features, alongside them are two kinds of messages that US Christians tend to espouse about mental illness, both of which also diverge from how many depression sufferers describe and understand their own condition. The first sort of popular Christian message casts depression as a sin or the result of a sufferer's sinfulness. It sees depression as a symptom of one's lack of faith, for example, or as God's punishment for some other misbehavior. This moral diagnosis appeals to some Christians because it promises that repentance from sin can heal or stave off depression. But others are put off by this explanation, which can seem to shame and stigmatize depression sufferers by placing the blame on themselves. The second common Christian message about depression, and this is the one that I more often hear in Catholic communities, frames it as a sort of sacred gift, a special cross to bear, or a dark night of the soul that God bestows upon people to help them grow in faith. Some Christians find this to be a really hopeful message that inspires them to persevere and search for meaning amid their mental pain. Yet to others, this sounds like a message of sort of toxic positivity, one that really dismisses the horrors and meaninglessness that define many experiences of depression. So altogether, we can see in part one how ordinary talk about depression, both in secular and in religious terms, often leaves something to be desired, right? For those who seek a richer and more accurate portrait of depression than mere sadness, and for those who are left unsatisfied by these Christian messages about depression, how else might they describe and understand this condition? I try to offer some resources to answer this question in part two of the book. As I mentioned, sufferers regularly characterize their depression as an experience of dislocation into a strange and inhospitable world, a harsh landscape, a wilderness even. And that's something about which Christian theologians have a great deal to say. Christianity's sacred scriptures abound with stories of dislocation into unhome-like places. Indeed, so plentiful is this imagery in the scriptural canon that Walter Brueggemann characterizes the Bible as primarily concerned with the issue of being displaced and yearning for a place. He labels the Israelites a landless folk and God's homeless people because of the frequency with which they are sort of unmoored from home and immersed in a harsh and unfamiliar place. These unfamiliar places are often called wildernesses in the scriptures, a term that has both literal and figurative uses in the Bible. Literally, they were specific terrains in the ancient world compared to, say, valleys or gardens. These wilderness terrains were known to be difficult to domesticate in service of human flourishing, really hard to live in. Because the literal wilderness was known for its inhospitality to human life, biblical authors frequently employed the wilderness as a symbolic image as well, a symbolic image for human experiences of precarity, struggle, and even fatality. Thus, even when the Bible depicts actual earthy turf, these places often simultaneously function in the text as symbols for something else as well. It's no surprise then that over the course of Christian history, religious teachers and writers have read biblical stories of literal untamed lands as meaningful analogs for the human struggles of the present day. The writings of the medieval mystics, for example, contain correlations between the deserts of the scriptures and the figurative wildernesses that these mystics experienced in relation to God. This long tradition of correlating biblical wildernesses to contemporary experience has not only helped Christians see the realities of their lives in the sacred scriptures, it's also afforded them insights about how God relates to circumstances like their own. Carrying forth this tradition, I suggest that Christians see depression as a contemporary wilderness experience. And in doing so, they can use the wilderness tales of the Bible to learn how God might relate to their depression. In the Hebrew Bible alone, variations in why the Israelites find themselves in difficult territory, how they experience these places, and how God responds to them provide a huge array of theological insights for interpreting depressive experience and addressing questions like, where are you, God, and why me? In the book, I consider various biblical tales of dislocation into unfamiliar lands, from Abraham's sojourn to the Exodus to the Babylonian exile, to sort of tease out the theological implications for contemporary experiences of depression. Along the way, I show that some of these stories lend themselves to existing Christian messages about depression because they justify suffering as a punishment for sin or as a sort of sacred gift from God. However, other wilderness stories offer something different that can expand Christian messages about depression in new ways. One that I've become particularly captivated by is the wilderness experience of Hagar from Genesis 21. Hagar was an enslaved woman in the house of Abraham and his wife Sarah. After Hagar becomes pregnant with Abraham's child, she flees into the wilderness where she encounters God, who instructs her to return to the clan with her newborn son, Ishmael. When we meet Hagar again, she has returned to life with Abraham and Sarah, who now also has a son of her own, Isaac. When the sight of young Ishmael and Isaac together provokes Sarah to demand Hagar's expulsion, Abraham consults God and eventually complies with Sarah's wish. Hagar is displaced into the wilderness with her infant son, and having been given very little water, they soon find themselves in death-bound circumstances. From this wilderness, Hagar cries out to God, "Do not let me look on the death of my child." God then calls to Hagar, and God opens her eyes to a well of water. Hagar's story sort of ends there in the wilderness as the text then gives way to Ishmael's story. Now, based on the text itself, Hagar's subsequent lifetime in the wilderness cannot be justified as an inherent good, as something worthwhile for the spiritual edification it promises, nor can it be explained as a punishment for sin when there's no mention of anything about Hagar's sin. Furthermore, recognizing that her suffering results from the malice of Abraham and Sarah does not explain why God relates to Hagar's suffering as God does, permitting it and withholding rescue from a life in this harsh landscape. As far as we can tell, Hagar's displacement into the wilderness and the suffering she endures there is nonsensical. It's meaningless. It's a theological mystery. We don't know why. This makes Hagar's wilderness experience different from Abraham's or the Exodus or the Babylonian exile, all of which present justifications for why God has allowed the Israelites to be displaced and suffer as they do. At the same time, Hagar's suffering clearly matters to God. In a previous wilderness experience, Hagar had named this God the God who sees, and then named her son Ishmael, meaning God hears. So although God does not reveal to Hagar a justification or a purpose for her suffering, God does see and hear her in her suffering. God is present to Hagar's pain in ways that Christian depression sufferers often identify as significant. What's more, by opening up Hagar's eyes to this vital well of water, God reveals new possibilities for survival and even improved quality of life that Hagar herself could not perceive. Observing this, Dolores Williams cites the womanist adage that God makes a way out of no way. By revealing new possibilities for living in this death-bound place, God indeed helps Hagar chart an otherwise unforeseen path for her life. We can therefore see how bringing Hagar's story to bear on contemporary depressive suffering could affirm those whose depression sort of resists standard Christian messages of justification and purpose, while at the same time inviting sufferers to consider whether their suffering might nevertheless matter to the benevolent God of the Christian faith, the God who is profoundly concerned with and attentive to the suffering and the distraught. Hagar's story also invites depression sufferers to hold out for yet unforeseen possibilities of community and agency and meaning and hope, possibilities that depression sufferers so often long for, but cannot perceive in the worst of their depression. To wrap up, in the final chapters of Dust in the Blood, I sort of take this interpretation of Hagar's story as the basis for Christian reflection on depression. And I argue that it provides avenues for thinking about several important theological issues, such as divine presence, salvation, as well as practical matters, such as Christian discipleship alongside those who live with depression, a topic that I know is so important to many of you on this call. This discipleship includes not only accompaniment with those experiencing inexplicable and unresolved depression, but also collective advocacy around mental health care access and mental health stigma. I'll leave my remarks at that so we have a chance to talk, Brother Fred, but I just want to say thank you again to all of you who are doing this important work, and I look forward to being in conversation.
Jessica, thank you so much. Wow, what a wonderful, and you did it so well, organized it so well. It's just, I mean, it's a hefty book. It's almost 215 pages long, and so to condense it all down, wonderful job. That's really beautiful. So thank you for being with us. Just a reminder to all of our participants, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll have some time to get to it. Jessica, I wanted to talk about this. You have done something very beautiful, I think, in connecting the scriptural, the basis of our tradition, right? The books that we often go to in our prayer, the Bible stories that we connect to something very modern, such as depression. And you did it in such a beautiful way, because I can tell you that prior to reading this book and prior to listening to you, I had never really considered the wilderness like a depression. Mm-hmm. And the story of Hagar has now just opened up. I mean, just my mind is flooded with so many beautiful images and so many beautiful ideas of how Hagar's struggle, Hagar's isolation, right? Because even the slaves, even she was a slave, yes, but the fact that she was isolated from family, from friends, from thankfully not her son, but that is hard for the Israelite people,
Mhm.
regardless of where you are, whether you're a slave or not. And so entering into this wilderness with Hagar is such a beautiful, it reminds me of, and I know you mentioned of this in your book, but it reminds me of Exodus, specifically when the people are complaining. They've been walking in the desert for so long. They're looking for, this place that Moses has said they're going to go to, and they just can't figure it out. And they're just getting angry and they're getting upset. And what a wilderness that is, right? And then they end up turning to maladaptive behaviors, what us psychologists would call, or just sinful behavior, right? They start creating the idols, and they start worshiping the idols and various different things like that. And that whole piece of, especially in depression, that can happen. I know in my depression, a lot of times it's harder for me to, when I'm trying to get out of it, I guess, when I'm in the reality of, like, in the midst of my depression, but I'm trying to get out of it. Sometimes I don't always choose the healthy direction, right?
Mhm.
And so it's helpful to have these biblical stories. Well, okay, they didn't either. So
Mhm.
I'm in good company, and God still protected them. God still loved them. So I guess I don't have a question. I just more so a thank you for opening that up to us, because that is such a beautiful gift for those who suffer with depression. Go to Hagar, go to the um, Egyptians and the Exodus, and so many others that I'm sure I will learn further on. But we do have a question. Where does counseling fit in all of this?
Mhm. I mean, I see, and I talk about this in the kind of more practical application parts of the book, but I think many depression sufferers speak very movingly to how they see counseling as a way that God provides a way out of no way, to use the phrase that I used earlier. That, you have this figure of Hagar who, in the worst of her suffering, doesn't see any possible way to go on with her life and her son's life. And God sort of opens her eyes, in her case, to this well of water that provides for her vital needs. I think analogously, counseling can be something for many depression sufferers that is the lifeline.
The
It
well of
doesn't always
water.
feel like a lifeline at first. Sometimes, there's moments where it does more than others, but I think many depression sufferers say, a place where I experience God is through the love, care, and companionship of my therapist. And there are other examples that emerge from these stories of depression that are at the heart of my book. I would say medication is often very similar in the way that people talk about it. I, you know, Community support. People talk so movingly of, their family members and friends accompanying them. I think all of these are examples of what, from a theological perspective, many depression sufferers are claiming as sort of avenues for God's grace working in their lives. And of course, I mean, as I'm sure many of you know, depression is a difficult and diverse experience. And so different people have different needs and different sort of treatment plans. I think often all of these can, for one person or another, serve as a site for encountering God, potentially.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't. That's it for today. But I just want to first of all say, Jessica, thank you so much for being with us again. We really look forward to hopefully having you again, in another time and talking more about your book. Just a few things I want to remind everybody. We have just started NCPD, National Catholic Partnership on Disability, yay, we have started our online learning courses. Yay, this has been a work in progress for some time now. And we are so happy. We have the longer course, which is here, but then we have there's other 2 shorter courses. Check them out, please. They are wonderful resources. We have some wonderful presenters who really talk about accompaniment, right? That beautiful idea of being able to walk with individuals who are struggling with disability, and so who are living with disability, who are. And so check those out. They are really wonderful resources. Also, if you are in the Louisville area, or if you want to fly out to the Louisville area, whichever one, we would welcome that. We are celebrating NCPD's 40th anniversary with Archbishop Kurtz. We are going to be honoring him for the Race for Belonging. So please check out that if you're able to come. We'd love to see you there to celebrate together in person. That will be at the National Shrine of St. Margaret of Castello. And then the last thing I want to mention is we're having another conference. We're starting to get into the conference world, so that's really wonderful. The Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disability is putting together their conference this year: One Lord, One Faith, One Family, Disability Ministry in a Synodal Church. So that's October 21st through the 22nd. So please, and that's going to be in Galveston, Houston, Texas. It'll be nice and warm, I would imagine, in October, because it's always warm in Texas. I think no matter what season it is. If you're able to come, please check it out. It will be a wonderful, I will be there, so I'm excited. I'll be at both events, but I'm excited to be there, be in person, celebrate with all of you. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I hope and pray that everyone has a blessed day on this feast of the Porciuncula as a Franciscan. I pray that you may find peace and grace and understanding and love, that you may be able to continue to accompany all those who you meet in this day. And we ask that you bless you all in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. God bless everyone, and thank you.